Let's talk a bit about the future of Vue.js. According to me, the future of Vue.js is quite bright given the recent explosion in popularity of the framework. Do you also think so?
I think the future is quite bright. As you said, I think Vue is only going to grow from here. Like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of large companies backing it. GitLab is a pretty large company that's been active a lot lately. Then there's all the other companies you mentioned, like Alibaba and those. Yeah, I don't think Vue is going to be going away anytime soon. It got to that point where the community started to kind of sustain itself, and members of the community started making better and improved tooling. And I think it hit that important point now where there's enough people to where newcomers can get the help they need, but it's also mature enough that you can actually build a full application.
I believe that Vue has a niche to it compared to other frameworks such as Angular and Ember, which are geared towards larger projects. Vue seems to do just fine in the space it occupies, so it is trying to be used for smaller projects.
Yeah, so I'll agree with that, but I want to add that, yeah, it's useful for small projects, but it's not just useful for small projects. The good thing about Vue is that it can scale up from a tiny application that you want to build on a weekend to display, some minor thing, to a full-blown enterprise, single page application with thousands of users and multiple pages. Like we said earlier, when you start, it's so lightweight that you don't really have to do anything to get going. It's just there. But yeah, that doesn't mean you can only make simple applications with this framework. For instance, where I use it, we built out a full suite of applications. We have a scheduling system, project tracking system, authentication system, and they're all separate single page applications built with Vue.
That's great. As we were talking about it, we can add other libraries to Vue to extend it to be even able to work with progressive web apps. You can really extend it to be able to create larger applications. Here's another question. For someone who just started in web development and they doesn't know any framework, would you advise them to go for Vue.js over the other frameworks?
Yeah, I would advise Vue.js. So I would say first that I would recommend learning the very basics of JavaScript. Like I don't think you should go in to any of these frameworks with not knowing any JavaScript or any programming. You can do that. I just think you'll have a slightly more difficult time than if you like were to learn the core JavaScript functionality first, just the basics, and then get into Vue. But that aside, yeah, I think Vue is a great framework to start with. It's so simple. Like I said, you don't need to do the whole build environment thing. You can just use a script tag and an HTML page. There's a website. I don't know if you provide like show notes or anything, but I can give you the link after. There's a website called codesandbox.io. It's kind of like a JS Fiddle or CodePen type thing, but you can run a full Vue application like in a little playground environment right in your browser. You don't need to install everything, but it's still using all these tools under the hood. You can log in with your GitHub account. I'll save it all locally on the cloud. But for people that just want to dip their toes in and are messing around with this stuff for the first time, that's what I really recommend because you don't have to install anything on your computer. You just click the Vue template on Code Sandbox, and it gives you a new template. And you can start coding.
That's great. You can create your Vue apps directly from the cloud.
Yeah, if you want to. And yeah, like I recommend I wouldn't do this full time, like all the time, but to get started. And whenever I have new ideas, I'd still turn to this too. If I just have like a small idea, I want to mock up quickly, I'm not going to make a whole folder on my computer and npm install every, you know what I mean? I'll just go to this website, start hacking away. And because for me, when I'm developing, I think like as soon as I have something visually on the page, I start to get into the zone more and it makes me more motivated to keep going. So if you can minimize that time from getting the idea to getting something visual on a web page, I think that's very important.
Absolutely, I agree. As someone who has multiple computers, it is very good to use the cloud, especially for synchronizing all your code in one place.
Exactly, I agree. I have a desktop at home and then I use a laptop for work. One's Mac and one's Windows, which makes it slightly more difficult. So I have to, switch back and forth. Yeah, using cloud services and then of course using version control like Git is very important for those reasons.
It depends for whether you should learn Vue.js or not. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. There's a lot of people who would learn programming to get a job. So you need to know whether there's demand in your country for Vue.js jobs. In Mauritius here, we do have a lot of demand for Vue.js, especially for Vue.js developers who also know PHP. So usually these are paired together here in Mauritius. I don't know if in your country there's a similar demand as well.
I've noticed, so I'm in the United States, in Michigan specifically. Around me, there's not too many, just like in my physical location, like view jobs. In the country, there is. In the United States, there's a decent amount, but usually it's in the coastal areas, San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, those kind of places. But I have noticed that number is growing. There's a website called viewjobs.com. I don't know if you've heard of that. They keep track of like view job listings and everything, compile those for you to list all over the world. I know LinkedIn has a really good search functionality as well for jobs. And I noticed that number, at least in the past 6 months or so, it seems to be rising. And what I really thought was interesting, though, as a developer in the United States, React is really big over here. Right now, like everyone's using React. It's the hot thing for all the startups, it seems. I see a lot more job postings for Vue internationally, in Europe or Asia, those kind of regions, which I thought that was very interesting. I don't know the reason for that, but
You are a full stack developer. You use Vue for the backend as well. You can use Vue.js itself, or how are you working with the backend?
sorry, yeah, I should have specified that. My backends are all at work Python. Flask is the framework, but yeah, Python language. Yeah, you can't use Vue as your backend. You can server side render with Nuxt, but yeah, Vue can't run on the backend itself. You would have to run some kind of Node API if you wanted to stick with JavaScript.
So you have the latest technologies, Python and Vue together. With Python, you also have some AI functionalities. I don't know if you tried to experiment with machine learning functionalities or Python.
We actually have done a little bit because for my specific application, we had to analyze the video data and do like things like facial recognition to just tell when a person is in a certain frame of a video clip. And yeah, all that was done using Python machine learning libraries, and then that runs on AWS cloud infrastructure. It can be scaled up very quickly.
That's great. You've been working with big data as well.
Yeah, that's part of my current job. It's a much smaller part. I'd say I probably do 60-70% of front end development design with Vue and everything. And then the other 30-40% is a mixture of back end and kind of like DevOps deployment and maintaining applications.
Is there any Vue.js tool you use? You mentioned about the cloud tool or Vue. I will be including a link to it in the video description and podcast description.
Yeah, so I would recommend, in addition to all the libraries you already mentioned, like the router, Vue router, and Vuex, there's a library called Vuetify. I really love that. I think their site is Vuetify.js. So Vuetify JS.com. They are a component design library. If anyone is familiar with something like Bootstrap or Bulma, any kind of these CSS frameworks that just get you up and going with some design system in your application, it's based on material design, and they just provide you with all these components that are already pre-made for. There's so many things. There's buttons, tables, modals, pop-ups, like anything you would need. And that's what I use for or that's what we use at work for all our applications is the Beautify design library. It makes things a lot easier since you don't have to be a CSS expert to, get a good looking accessible application.
It is designed for Vue.js especially.
Yeah, it's only for Vue.js. It won't support any other frameworks right now, at least. And it just provides you with Vue components for all these common reusable components like buttons, like I said. Looking through on their thing, they provide carousels, icons, lists, menus, navigation drawers, toolbars. You can change enough of the functionality usually or the look of the component so it's not like you're locked in and every application you make is going to look the same if you use this. You can still have a lot of control and customization, but it just makes things easier since you don't have to reinvent that wheel and solve a problem someone else already solved.
I've been using Bootstrap personally, but I will be trying Beautify.js.
If you are using Bootstrap, are you using regular Bootstrap, or have you used the Bootstrap view at all?
It is Bootstrap View, yes. For some projects, sometimes I have to go for regular Bootstrap because they were already on Bootstrap, but usually I will go for the Vue version.
The application I talked about when I had to convert and add Vue to an existing application, that application is using Bootstrap. Eventually switched it out to Bootstrap View. But I found, yeah, the only real benefit you got there was you had to write less code, I think. It was less divs and less classes you had to throw on everything.